Welcome to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, where we aim to break down barriers, demystify blindness, and promote real and lasting change. Join host David Steinmetz as he connects us with professionals who are making a positive impact in the community. These leaders help empower individuals who are blind or have other disabilities to live a full and inclusive life. Let's lean in as David kicks off today's conversation.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time. I'm really excited for today's show and my special guest. But first and foremost, I want to thank Arizona Industries for the Blind, AIB. They empower people who are blind or vision impaired to achieve their version of the American dream by creating and sustaining dignified employment. And I think a lot of times I say the word empower, and I really kind of dig into what that means. And it's giving opportunities to make decisions for themselves, to be able to say, I want to, choose to work here, and have the opportunities to be self-reliant and self-supporting. And that's really what AIB is provides that opportunity. And I'm very thankful for them to continue to sponsor this show. Recently it was noted that 1 out of 4 people in the US have a disability, right? So someone sitting next to you um, that you might not know has a disability. It's not as like a physical disability that is external outward, but with that type of population, you think bring it to a local level in Arizona. I think we're around 7.5 million people. 1/4 of that is about 2 million, just nearly 2 million people with a disability in Arizona. And, that just to me is a staggering number, as well as that if we think about the unemployment rate of people who are blind or people with other disabilities is, for years, the number's been 70%. And 70% of 2 million people is a lot of people that are sitting on the sidelines who want to work, who have something to contribute to societies to make an organization better, make their lives better. Because work, I think we'll all agree, is more than just the paycheck, right? It brings value, it brings self confidence, and it's not just something to do, right? We're creating value for ourselves and for the organization. So it's so important to have these conversations about disability and in the workforce. And we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. We're talking not just the normalized, or not normal, but the standard check boxes of race, gender, sexual orientation, etc. But we also have to include people with disabilities. And I'm really excited to have my good friend, and we're continue to have conversations, learn more and more about each other. Jules Hyde. Jules is the vice chair of the Arizona chapter of Association of People Supporting Employment First, as well as an employment specialist with the Maverick Consulting company. So, Jules, thank you for being here. And we were talking off mic here a little bit this morning, and what really excites me is to hear your passion. And I asked what tip, is kind of a general question, and just get the explosion of passion and motivation. And that question was, how did you get into this industry? And so I'd love if you wouldn't mind just kind of telling me again and our listeners.
Absolutely. Absolutely. David, thank you. Thank you again for having me here on the show. So like I was saying before we started, though, when I first got into the industry, it was actually kind of a really sordid tale in so many ways. So I guess it really begins with me becoming a single father at 19. And instead of going the course of taking college and university for the trades and the careers that I was interested in at the time, I ended up taking whatever job that I could. And so for, a good decade, I spent time being a landscaper, working at restaurants, learning how to be a mechanic, welding, doing leasing consultant, phone sales, whatever I could do. And typically I would grow in those different businesses. And at one point in time, I worked with a leasing consultant company that closed up. I got a large severance. And with that severance, I took a year off and wanted to become a stand-up comic, which was something that had always interested me. I had a background in being a thespian. I wanted to go into comic book art, tell stories, things of that nature was what I was interested in my youth. And from that, I met somebody that was working in the industry, and they said, "Hey, Jules, like you're actually like pretty happy, for a comic." And so that struck him as, hey, there may be some. I have an opportunity over here, and the opportunity was with a local provider, and the position was going to be an employment coach. And so I found that very interesting. My personal background with disabilities in my own family is my grandmother was a world-class belly dancer, and she traveled all over the world in her belly dance troupe. And in the early 80s, sustained a traumatic brain injury that left her nonverbal and reliant on a wheelchair and on my grandfather. But I spent summers with them, and I knew that my grandmother was still this complete belly dancing woman that I had remembered prior to her accident. And despite her inability to talk like she used to or move like she used to, she was still 100% my grandmother, in every sense of the word.
Sure.
And so I came into my first day on the job working with 4 young adults who had disabilities at a local healthcare facility, thinking and really coming from the perspective that these are complete people, and they can do everything that anybody else can do. And I asked what was going on with the team and what was my goal, and they said, well, this is a work program that is designed to help this team of individuals get a job with this location. I said, okay, that's great. I'm all about that. How long have they been here? Well, this location and that team have been there for a number of years. Some of them had been there 6-7 years. One of them had been there 12 years.
Wow.
And so I said, well, they haven't got the job. They haven't got the job yet. What's the problem?
What does it take?
Yeah. And they said, well, we actually bringing you in because they're talking about dissolving the program. I said, well, okay, we won't have that, So what is it that we're doing? And what we were doing was grabbing different private hospital documents from the different doctors' offices and taking them down to a room that they had there at the facility with a large shredder, and we would shred literally tons of paper, day in, day out, week in, week out. But the team had a history of not being able to get all the documents done, having a higher cost for the location than possibly going somewhere else and getting the paper shredded by a different company.
Mm-hmm.
And on day one, I noticed that, logistically, we were going up to the top floor and then going to the second floor and then going to the basement, shredding some, then going to the 4th floor and then going back down to the basement, shredding. So why are we doing it this way? This is taking forever. We'll never get done. Why don't we just go to the top and work down? Mm-hmm. They said it was set up that way due to the specifications of each nurse's manager on each floor. So I went and talked to each nurse's manager. They had no idea what I was talking about. So we adjusted the route, and suddenly we were getting done in half the day, right? And I said, all right, and we're getting done half the day. Give these guys the job. And I said, well, it's not a full job, and now we don't want to pay them for half a day. What if we give them some more work they can do, and then they get the whole day, and then you can get the job? I said, oh, well, I don't know if, the reward for doing quicker, better work should be more work. Right? But you know what? If this is the opportunity, and I was still pretty green in the work itself as well, I said, all right, I'm gonna 100% pool with all my might and see what we can, see if we can make these positions become a reality. Mm-hmm. And we pushed and pooled for another year and a half, and it never resulted in them getting hired. And, we went to HR, we went up against a number of different walls. From the employer standpoint, there was all these questions came up at the end.
Sure.
And these guys have been here 16 years or 12 years in some,
Mm-hmm.
a combined 20 some odd years that these people have been here. And we're asking these questions now at the end. That, why is that? Why are we allowing these defenses to come up? They've been here for years. How are we just now talking about it? Ultimately, that resulted in me really starting to feel like, this was not a workable opportunity for these 4 individuals I was working with. We worked harder and harder, yet it didn't result and bear fruit in a position for them. Right. So I closed that down. Through the years of working there, I was able to rise up through the ranks of being a direct coach to a manager, supervisor, and eventually director of the program. And from that standpoint, and in that position, I was able to make some effective changes to the program. And that was also about the time where I heard about Employment First from a professional friend, Susan Vural, who happened to be on APSE at the time, the Association of People Supporting Employment First. And I heard her talk about the philosophy of Employment First, where it really flips traditional employment models on its head. And the models that I started in, it was, we're asking people with disabilities to prove they can work. Go to this workshop and prove that you can take multi-step direction. Prove that, you know how to fold something, or you have the dexterity to use your hands to put something together. Prove. And I thought to myself, at 3, I wanted to be an archaeologist. Nobody asked me to prove that.
Right.
At 5, I was going to be a comic book artist. Nobody said, well, you're going to have to prove that first. They just said, yeah, Jules, you're going to be that. That's what So I got to dream. And I noticed that's what really was lacking in the people I was working with, right? They were told, by society, their school, possibly their parents, family members, that they wouldn't get to do these things, that was out of their wheelhouse. And in my time, for me, work is absolutely, like you had said earlier, David, it's an integral part of life. As much as love and connection to other people is, I think work is one of the most important aspects of life for every human being. We are what we do. We are what we dream to do, right? And that motivates us and pushes us forward. I can't imagine a life where I don't have that opportunity to dream.
Sure.
And so that was really my mission from that point on, was to help others, really dream about what they want to do. And from Employment First philosophy, I found an avenue to be able to do that with the clients and individuals with disabilities who I was working with. So I took that team of individuals that we closed that work down. And that, again, I'm enemy number 1. I'm closing this thing that, they were getting a solid paycheck for the years that they were there. There was something they could do for Monday through Friday. And we probably could have perpetually done that for another 20 years, right? But it didn't really result in real change and real opportunity for these individuals beyond that work program. And so I said, what I sat down with them. I said, guys, you want to work. What is it you want to do? And they go, well, yeah, I want to work. Okay, great. You're sitting here with me. We've been doing the program. I know that you want to work. I know you want to be busy. I know you enjoy this, but what is it that you want to do? Well, no one's ever asked me that before, and some of these individuals were in their 20s, 30s, 40s, even 50s. In your 50s, and nobody's asked you what you want to do in life.
Yep.
That hit my heart. And it struck a chord in me. And I said, all right, this is what I'm going to be doing.
Yeah.
And so I sat down with them. I said, what do you want to do? And well, I don't know. And then through Employment First, with the Employment First philosophy, there's some avenues and ways to deliver that kind of supported service.
Sure.
And the number one step in that service is a process called discovery.
Mm-hmm.
And discovery is a process, and an employment specialist or a job coach can help a client or an individual with disabilities who's been told they can't, won't, shouldn't, and wouldn't have the opportunity, that they can, should, will have the opportunity. It's very possible. And what is it that you're interested in?
Right.
Right. And so one example was one of those individuals had a monicum of success, but every 6 months would be on the verge of getting fired because of some type of behavior in and around the employment location. And I asked them, what is it that you want to do? We're online. I see that they have shelves of model airplanes all over. And so I asked them about that. Now, I've been working with this individual 5-6 years, never knew that they liked airplanes. Right. And so shame on me for that. But he starts rattling off. I can tell you by the sound of the engine.
Oh, wow.
What kind of airplane it is. And I know everything from World War I up to today. And it just blew my mind at how knowledgeable this individual was that. And I said, well, why aren't you working at the airport? Well, I can't even do this thing over here at the, healthcare facility. I can't even shred papers right. How would well, you can put this, the stuff from the cart onto the, onto the conveyor belt, and we can shred it. I think you could take luggage, put it on a conveyor belt, and get it into an airplane, and suddenly a light bulb went off. You really think I could do that, Jules? I don't think so. I know you could.
Right.
I absolutely know you could. Right. I have no doubt in my mind. And so we went down and introduced the individual to the company that does that work down there. And there were some reservations, and as the job coach, I acted as a liaison to show this company, what kind of appropriate accommodations, what appropriate accommodations are in the first place, and what kind this individual would need to be successful with their team.
Sure.
And they opened up to the idea of this, saw the positives in it. The individual that I was working with had experience in their own family with disabilities. So that obviously was, a leverage and a help. Because any employer that has what I like to call a champion there, can make it easier to spread that knowledge and to spread that experience throughout that employer's location. And so that individual, would have sometimes trouble with keeping up with their hygiene, being unkept, long beard, long facial hair, just didn't have a lot of interest in that. I go down to see them, in this role, and I didn't recognize them, to be honest. I honestly didn't recognize them. I thought, where's my guy? He should be here. We're late. This is day one. Oh no, and then suddenly he's been sitting there the whole time. He got there half an hour before me. Family comes to me and goes, I don't know what's going on, but first time for, ever, he's up. We're not pulling him out of bed. He's talking about work around the dinner table. We're laughing and talking about dreams and aspirations. He's got paid time off. Things are changed with our disabilities benefits, but it's all becoming a wash and becoming something better. And for the first time, that individual had choice, and they got to go through the process of interviewing, creating a resume, doing everything everybody does to get work. They got to try the job, find out if they liked it or not, and decidedly found that they're really good at it and haven't missed a day, since.
Yeah. And that's what's so important, right? Is when you feel that you're contributing, one, you're doing something that you enjoy, right? People say work is work. I go in, I do the 9 to 5, and I go home, and you're not getting anything out of that. Whereas when you go in and you do the 9 to 5, but you're getting something out of it, there's value, there's, I'll say, enjoyment, right? That it's a good fit. You're going in the lines of what makes you happy. And sometimes we miss that connection, I think, with work. And some people say, well, job is a job. It is. It is a means of income. It's a means for paying your bills. But it also if you're in the example you were saying, if you're not happy, you're not enjoying what you're doing, then you're not going to be successful. And all it's going to do is um, continue to weigh on you, and then it also weighs on the employer. And I don't want to hire this person because they're not completing the task, they're not um, showing up, whatever it is, right? And then that create continues to create this negative perception. And well, I hired this person with a disability. They didn't show up. They didn't complete the work on time. Why should I give another person a chance? So good, great success story, and sharing that, and saying when given the opportunity and given the tools to be successful, people with disabilities can do that. They can succeed and thrive. And that's really what, I hope in our conversations we bring in some insights as to this is more than just doing something that's good, right? More than just a feel good thing. We're
Absolutely.
trying to create an opportunity for anybody, whether it's anybody that has the interest and that has the desire to do it, whether you have a disability or not. That's what employers are looking for, is those people with the desire.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I also, in my experience, find that employers that engage with individuals with disabilities diversify their workplace,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And with that diversification comes different ideas, different perspectives, and that equals revenue in
Yeah.
the end,
Sure.
and the data that I've collected and seen. So I find that companies that engage with individuals with disabilities or have a diversified team are typically higher earning, at the cutting edge, tip of the spear type of
Mm-hmm.
companies,
Mm-hmm.
and oftentimes it shows that companies' commitment to equality, inclusion,
Mm-hmm.
accessibility, and so I find all around it's a win-win. And it's great to be in a position where you can help connect win-win situations, right? and
Mm-hmm.
and see enacting change in your community, in individuals' lives, and real change that lasts,
Right.
moving forward.
Yeah.
That team, that employer, that family, that individual, pushed up against uncomfortable, got outside of their
Mm-hmm.
comfort zone,
Right.
pushed the boundaries, thought outside of the box that they've been put in, and and showed the world a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in that way, I think that eventually all 2 million of the individuals here with disabilities in Arizona can find value, work, and connect that value to their persona, to their
Right. Yeah.
character as themselves.
Yeah. Exactly. And sometimes we find where the direction that we thought we were wanted to go, right? Your experience of wanting to be a comedian or a comic book artist, and what we think we want and where we end up are sometimes a lot different.
Absolutely.
How many times do you hear people that have gone to school, got a degree in a field, and then never end up in that profession because it wasn't what they wanted? Sometimes you have to find that out, though. You have to have that experience. And same thing with employment, right? Like you can start off in a career that you think you're going, or an organization, and you grow to your highest level of that organization, and you're ready to move on to something different. You should have that right, or
Absolutely.
have the opportunity to do that. And same thing with people with disabilities, should have the same opportunity to be able to come into a workplace that they want to try out and work,
Absolutely.
um, prove. In a sense, you do have to prove yourself, just like anybody else, I think, has to prove that you can do the job. Otherwise, the employer is not going to keep you around because work's not getting done.
Right.
But you shouldn't have to, you should be given those opportunities to continue to do that growth. And if you've reached your highest potential with that organization and you want more, then you should have that opportunity. If you get in there and you go, you know what, I made a mistake. This is not what I thought it was. And there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, I need to continue to find what it is that brings me passion.
Right.
It's exciting. As an employment special, or now the director of that program,
Mhm.
an employment coach, what is it that you think, do you see are some of the barriers from the employer side? And then you kind of hinted a little bit about it in your intro about the barriers from the person that you're working with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, um, the employment barriers from an employer standpoint is often a derivative of ignorance. And that I find it's a difficult thing to talk about, but, employers don't, I think, have a fear of engaging with somebody with disabilities, it not
Mm,
working out on their end. And that, typically 99.9% of the time has to do with revenue, right? And
mhm.
and cost. Because I think most companies are, all about profit, right?
Mhm,
And so they're looking for, employees that can add to their profit margins and get more out of for less,
mhm.
oftentimes. And so an employer's worry is, okay, I'm going to hire an individual with disabilities, not get the productivity level that I'm looking for, and then I'm the bad guy firing this individual with disabilities. And I think that's the main fear for employers.
Hmm.
What does that perception look like? What is it legally? What does that mean for me as an employer? And you'll find that, if you dig into that and provide a little information, that it's no different from hiring anybody
Right,
else.
right. Yeah,
And so that really is more of a perception thing, right? And
right.
once I can, as in my role as an employment specialist or coach, go, look, how is that different from anybody else that you hire?
Mhm,
Right?
mhm.
Anybody can come in and go on, I've had individuals interview with doctorates that ended up not being the greatest employees. I've had people that, I don't know what I'm doing, but this sounds interesting, end up being the best employees,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
everything in between. So as a employment specialist and through the programs that I was working with, having the ability to go, with me here as a liaison, let's give it a chance, and then stepping back and seeing the work get done and seeing the change in the employer's perception of individuals with disabilities ability, um, you know, uh, can really lay a lot of those employer worries to rest. But you have to kind of have an example for them to see first,
Mhm.
or um, have the program or that situation or experience with that individual and location work out so well quickly, which means as an employment specialist, you got to be on top of your stuff. You
Mhm.
got to be open, transparent. You got to prepare the family. This is what to expect. You have to let the employer know this is, kind of what I'm
Right.
seeing and what to expect. And really be a great storyteller so that everybody really has a full comprehension of what the individual's dealing with, right? I've worked with
Mhm.
individuals that may need a couple more seconds to compute something.
Sure.
So in those couple of seconds, they look like they're milking it,
Mhm, mhm,
right?
mhm.
So if you can put that out there and go, look, this is, if you give this individual those couple extra seconds to compute, I can pretty much guarantee 99% of the time he's going to be right on. Right. And that's
Right.
what you're looking for, especially when the rest of your employees are hitting 70%, 80% marks. Right.
Mhm.
And then they go, okay, even though it takes that individual maybe 30 seconds or 45 seconds longer than I expected to answer that question, I'm seeing that they are getting everything right. They do have a passion for this work. They're
Mhm.
providing a quality of work that in some cases is higher
Right.
than some of my other staff.
Sure.
And now they're the example for everybody else,
Right, raising the bar.
raising the bar, because they have an opportunity and they're giving it their all,
Mhm.
and that's what I do every day. I come in and give it my all
Sure.
in any job that I ever did. And you give an individual with disabilities an opportunity to give their all, you're going to be impressed.
Yeah.
I can pretty much guarantee it.
Mhm.
So from the employer side, as far as those worries, it really comes to, I believe, ignorance,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
just not either having that experience within your own family, having that experience within the company in and of itself at that point.
Mhm.
But if you are an employer, engage. Open up to that idea, because in my experience, it's been nothing but a win-win.
Right.
It provides long-standing employment for many of the individuals, so
Mhm.
it can decrease your turnover in so many ways.
Mhm.
I think employers are really feeling that. Um, and again, I think it's just good business, right?
Right. Yeah. There's um, expectation is a word that I think a lot of people fear or don't want to um, have as somebody with a disability. I don't want to set an expectation. I'm going to set it, or I'm going to set it so low that then that person is going to achieve exactly what you think of them.
Right.
If you set a higher expectation for yourself or for the organization sets for their employees, then you help build that employee to meet those expectations. And oftentimes that doesn't happen. So, right, certainly the engagement. And in the disability community, I hear a lot of times, from the job seeker, there's been lots of times I've been at conferences and trying to recruit, and well, I'm looking for a part-time on Tuesdays only, and I only want to do XYZ.
Right.
How do you overcome that if you're trying to tell an employer, look, I've got people, right,
Mhm.
70% unemployment, nearly 2 million people in Arizona,
Yeah.
and we want to put people back to work. How do you have that conversation with an employer that says, well, this person can only work these hours, or they can only do this, or even having the conversation with the individual is you're going to have to push yourself a little bit outside that comfort zone.
Yeah.
And maybe that's a conversation with that individual and their family.
Yeah.
And again, maybe raising those expectations of what.
I believe that's the latter. Yeah. If you come to me as a client or an individual with disabilities and you want to engage with me and you say, I want to work, but I can only work Mondays from 9 to 1 and Thursdays from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. I'm going to go, first off, why? If you
Mhm.
have different programs, or if you have school, or, if all these reasons are because you're busy and you're doing some therapies to increase your capabilities, skills, and
Mhm.
readiness for employment, then I can work with that. Right. All right.
Mhm.
Let's find an opportunity. Let's find an employer that has a need from 10 a.m.
Mhm.
to and
Right.
for those specific things. And, we're going to put the network out there. Now, if it's just because I stay up late with my friends and play video games all night, or because I was told I can't, or because I have 9 ferrets that I need to take care of, well, then that's a discussion about
Mhm.
commitment,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
About desire and belief in yourself.
Mhm.
And oftentimes I'll find, typically that person's still living in the reality that they can't, won't, and shouldn't.
Mhm.
Right. And so there's a lot of fear around
Mhm.
that, and fear
Mhm.
around putting yourself out there, with the I can't, won't, and shouldn't mentality, and then proving that mentality by having a failure. Right.
Mhm. Mhm.
And for the employer, it's a look, oh, yep, yep, see. And for the client, yep, yep, I was right. And everybody
Yeah.
was right,
Yep. Mhm.
So as somebody, uh, as an employment specialist, you have to be very mindful, uh, and I think everybody is, for the most part, on not setting up people for failure, right?
Mhm. Sure.
Setting individuals up for success. And that's, again, through communication, knowing that individual's story. So that's
Mhm. Mhm.
pairing with that individual, and getting to know what makes them tick. And that comes through the process of discovery, right?
Right.
And they discover about themselves things that they're capable of, and you discover with them, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so I think that's why, through an employment first philosophy, the process of discovery, and then using that discovery to get to competitive integrated employment, or supported employment
Mm-hmm.
really is currently best practices and the formula in which we can really produce some real good success stories in our society today. You know,
Mm-hmm.
and I
Yeah.
see America, our communities really being ready for that too.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
think as much as we're still the Lewis and Clarks of this work and on the frontier of this work, I'm seeing a change.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of conversations happening
Yeah.
on a more regular basis. It's becoming more apparent that, as you mentioned, whether it's from the profitability culture within organizations, you see all these positive increases in within organizations to um, people with disabilities that are working to improve themselves. Whether it's going back to school or trade school or learning a new skill on your own, they're ready. They're just waiting for that opportunity. And so it's really important to continue to have these conversations. You mentioned supported employment. Can you define or what that means? If I'm thinking about as an employer or as an individual, what is supported employment?
Great question, and thanks for that, Dave. Supported employment helps individuals with disabilities obtain competitive work in the community and provides the supports necessary to ensure success for that workplace and that individual. So it really is just that. It's helping an individual with disabilities be trained on the specific tasks that they would be expected to do and hit that level of productivity expectation, right? For that
Mm-hmm.
employer to
Mm-hmm.
create a sustainable work environment for that individual. Um, it helps consumers find jobs that pay competitive wages in integrated settings,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that
Mm-hmm.
sounds like, okay, yeah, common sense. That's what a job is, but not for people with disabilities, right? For many years, people with disabilities it's been okay for them to be paid sub minimum wage,
Mm-hmm.
so below minimum wage.
Right.
It's been okay for them to be stuck in minimum wage positions for years
Mm-hmm.
whilst not getting pay increases or opportunity for advancement. So supported employment is a process and of being able to really provide that equality for individuals with disabilities that individuals that are neurotypical get
Sure.
and take for granted, I
Sure.
think, many times. Yeah.
Right. So it's not you doing the job for the employee. It's
No.
not, and you're not being the employer is not paying for you to be there. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. So
Yeah.
you're not doing the job for the individual.
Yeah.
In certain cases, you may need to train hand over hand,
Sure.
right? So that's the closest you'll ever get to doing the job for the individual.
Mm-hmm.
But you're setting provisions, whereas you're helping support that individual and getting the tasks independently,
Mm-hmm.
and you're helping that location or employer deliver those reasonable accommodations that allow their employee to be successful.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So this isn't Jules doing the work.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't Jules managing the location. This isn't, Jules telling you this is what you signed up for this job. You said you wanted to do this.
Right.
And here we are doing it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to help you. And my job, the best day in my work is the day my clients turn around to me and go, you know what are you doing here?
Yeah.
My
Yeah,
job is to
absolutely.
put myself out of a job.
Yep.
The best days are when the employer goes, I think we got it.
Mm-hmm.
When we
Mm-hmm.
sit down with the meeting and go with the client and say, everything's happy, you're getting it, good. Go to the employer. Do you guys feel confident enough that, everything's going to work out?
Mm-hmm.
And they go, yeah. And okay, I'm out of here. That's the best day.
Sure.
But I think that goes back to some of the fears that employers and parents have, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you close up a case or when you're ending, that's when those defense mechanisms, that's when those employment barriers can come up.
Sure.
So I also think it's important, as much as I like to go, okay, I'm done, I always end on a note that if anything changes, these supports are still here.
Right.
These entities didn't go away. I'm not going away. So nothing's changing, right? I think oftentimes in traditional models, when the individual would get the job, well, that means the provider's going away.
Right. Yep.
And that's the main fear, is that the employer's left without support, that the family's left without support. In a society where if you don't have support, you're going to get eaten up.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Yep.
You're going to be making the wrong decisions because you're ignorant to the details or the intricacies of what can change if you make certain amounts of money, all those little things. So I think it's important to go, this is continuing support, right? And get to the kinds of services, like the Division of Developmental Disabilities has many end services, or what are called end goal services.
Okay.
Those are services that provide support perpetually for an individual, right? So I might not check in for a year, but if something changes, right, you can still engage.
Right.
You can get that support. If you get a new manager that comes in and has a totally different management style and doesn't, champion your disability,
right,
let's work with that.
Right.
Let's bring in a liaison that's, hit it hard for a couple of weeks or months and get you back on track. Right. So I think that it's important that we know that those kind of services are out there, and that we utilize the services when needed, but also do away with those perpetual services, which is kind of oxymoronic in the way that I'm talking about it. But
no, I totally understand. When I was managing one of our lines of business, and we had an employee with other disabilities, not blindness, and this person had a job coach. And so when we first hired him, that person was on site, and just exactly what you're talking about, making sure they understand the processes, understanding the flow, helping them through those processes, and gaining up to the productivity level. Then the job coach kind of backed off a little bit, then would come in maybe once a week, and then maybe once a month, and then maybe every 6 months. And and the conversation was always start with the employee first. How are things going? And it's not only just at work, but at home as well. And then they would come and talk to me about how do I see things going, and having the conversations. And if there's areas of focus that I need to have improvements, and we have a conversation, the three of us sit down and have that conversation if need be. And, really helped me understand, and helped the organization understand that, everybody's needs are a little bit different. Having a disability or not, we all learn differently. Some are visual, some are hands-on, some process things differently, and so forth. So it's being able to understand who people are, understand that we're all people, and working towards making the conversation around that person's needs as well. And I think maybe a part of that philosophy is through the APSE's philosophy, right? Is understanding the whole person, and kind of the example that you used earlier. And another one I've heard is, um, working with people with disabilities, and individuals say, well, I can't even boil a pot of water. And the job coach says, well, let's not find a job where you have to boil water. Let's find a job that you can do the things that you like. And so it's really having those conversations, having the same conversation with the employer.
Absolutely.
And getting them out of the mindset that it's going to either reasonable accommodations going to be expensive to bring this person in, or it's going to be too long of a learning curve, whatever those misconceptions are, and having the open and honest conversations that, Chris from the president CEO of AIB had last week, was have the conversation, because if you don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. And if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's, also why I very much appreciate APSE, in that this is a volunteer agency, of members that recognize that everyone has abilities and can contribute to their work, and should be recognized and rewarded with fair pay. So this is a group of individuals who live it, have a passion for it, and really are doing what we can to continue to push that conversation, push the education out there. So if you haven't heard of the Association of People Supporting Employment First, those who are listening, I suggest that you go out and do a little research on it. There's 36 different chapters around America for the states that are engaging with that. Arizona committed to being an employment first state in 2018. And we do have an active chapter here, and always looking to gain more members. So if, being in contact with groups that have success stories, that have seen competitive integrated employment, which is real work for real pay for people with disabilities. That's really what competitive integrated employment is. If you want to be closer to that, then engage with APSE. Come to some of the trainings or webinars that we provide. We have meetings. Again, it's volunteer, so you can join and get in contact and connect with a network nationwide of like-minded individuals who have lived the same experiences, who've had shared understandings of stories, and really do get it. Right. And so the more we can grow communities like APSE, I think the better for every community.
Yeah, absolutely. Really. And when we talk about competitive integrated employment, you're right. You're saying real pay for real work, and everybody has the same opportunity, right? And whether that's benefits, upward mobility, professional growth, those kind of things. And within the disability community, I think there's a lot, and just going to open the door here, but there's a lot of differentiation between what is competitive integrated employment and what is not. And, I'll use AIB for an example as an Ability One agency. We have a mission, and there's a law that established that a certain percentage of direct labor work is performed by people who are blind. Is the recognition that opportunities in the community aren't there. The 70% unemployment rate is what it's been, and we are focused on making a difference in the life of someone who's blind, vision impaired, in a job that they want. And that number, that ratio that says you have this mandate, some people would say that that's not integrated. And I look at it and I say, well, my peers are working side by side with sighted or other people with other disabilities, right? 1 in 4 that some we may not know about. They're doing the same job, they're getting the same pay. They have to compete for a job. Of course, we're going to look to see, is there a qualified person who is blind to do the job? And they get the same benefits. So how could that not be an integrated work setting? And then, the opportunities for professional growth are there. And some would say, well, that mandate means that you have to keep people in that 75%. So you're limiting their opportunity. And if I look at it and go, well, if I promote David into a supervisory role or out of a direct labor, then I just created an opening for somebody else.
Absolutely.
And I often struggle with, how do we find a compromise? How do we get an understanding of what, again, is it work? Is it the type of work? Is it what is it? Is it developing a job that meets the needs of the individual, right? We're talking about supported employment, for example. If that person can only work because of their stamina or physical limitations, so they can only work 3 days a week, or you look at a job description, they can do 80% of that, and I think, is that job carving or something along those lines?
Job carving. Absolutely. Job carving. You can
Or
job
sharing,
share.
right?
Yeah,
So
sharing.
those are tools that you can use to bring somebody in with a disability and help them achieve their goals. Right.
And create a win-win for yourself as the employer as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it is about looking for those opportunities, right? And pushing and trying it. In the what I've seen over at AIB, the expectations are set clearly for everybody across the board, whether you're blind or not, right? And so that to me is integrated. If they have peers, that are working, that are neurotypical or not blind, then that's integrated, as integrated as any other place. It just, in your case, is the opposite, or could be viewed as the opposite, as an employer who's never engaged with somebody with disabilities. Right. So in most cases, or on your average cases, it's this employer's first go at having somebody with disabilities on their team. Right. Whereas AIB might be, well, you may have less individuals that don't have disabilities there. So it's almost like the opposite experience for a lot of places. Not a bad thing. At all. Just I could see how that could be perceived as what we used to call sheltered workshops, or things of that nature. But it's absolutely not that. A sheltered workshop is designed to be that. It's got a procurement. It's being paid for by the state. It's literally everybody there has disabilities except for the coaches that are doing quality control. That's a completely different thing. And so I think you have to be discerning about the details. Right. Because the devil's in the details in that situation. Absolutely. There's a stark difference between what AIB is doing and a sheltered workshop. And if you've been in both environments, you would know that right away. Right.
Thank you for saying that. It's so true. And again, it comes down to perception. It comes down to
perception of reality, unfortunately.
And can I just make sure you're stepping up to the mic? Sorry. And it comes down to that is not having a conversation. And this is what I believe to be true. And if you don't step out of that comfort zone, if you're not the employer that the owner or the president or somebody in leadership to say, this initiative is important to me. Having a diverse workforce, whatever the reason is that's important to you, and most times it's because a family member has acquired a disability or something like that. And so they see that the challenges that person can face, they're going to start an initiative, and they push that down the line to make sure that everybody's on board. Let's get everybody trained in terms of the leadership to make sure we have the skills to effectively communicate and not put any bias and so forth. And let's go down this road. Let's make sure our technology is accessible. Let's make sure our facility is accessible. And the only way that you're going to find the answers to those is ask the question. And, as in being involved with the ISO processes at AIB is always why, right? Why did this happen? And looking for the solution, right? The 5 whys, and find the solution and put in processes to resolve that. And the same thing can be applied to when hiring people with disability.
Absolutely. I think ultimately, to I guess oversimplify it really though, and really what APSI believes is that everybody should work, and it goes back to, again, we are what we do. I'm currently Jules, the employment specialist and life coach, and I've been that for many years now. And prior to that, I was Jules the landscaper, Jules the mechanic, and I think most people take that for granted, that they can tie their persona and their value to the work that they do. And I think that's the most important part about this work that we do, and these conversations, creating more equality for individuals with disabilities. Because,
Yeah.
To imagine a life where you can't dream is a sad, dark place.
Yeah, for
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, because I know you're working really hard in the community. We do the same, and there are people that are listening, and taking steps to do that, and there's more and more conversations that are being had on a more regular basis. And when you take out the disability and you look at it from the person centric, um, you'll find that that individual is just like you.
Exactly.
They're gonna laugh at the same things. They may make jokes, right? Or some things sometimes may be awkward. But you know what? I'm awkward sometimes.
Got that right.
And hey, you know me too well, then, now, don't you?
No, I'm just me too.
And I think we forget that, because we have this image of, or fear that you mentioned, right? Is fear of disability. And unfortunately, disabilities doesn't have that fear. It doesn't discriminate, and it happens to it can happen to any one of us. It'll probably touch pretty much everybody at some point in our lives. And the less you or the more that you engage, the less fear there is. And that's the same with
Absolutely.
anybody, right?
Absolutely. My experience, on day one, I was, it was like holding a newborn baby, and I've never been a dad. It was like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm doing. And, after years of doing the work, I find that they've taught me more. My clients and the people I've got to engage with have taught me more about human perseverance, dedication, care, compassion, love, all these very strong, powerful emotions, right? And powerful lines of thought. I've grown more from seeing the challenges, seeing the perseverance, seeing the courage that the people that I work with have. And that's grown me in so many more ways than I think I've ever helped anybody else grow.
Right.
So if you have an opportunity to engage or get closer to somebody with disabilities, do it. You're missing out if you haven't, because there's a human courage there that if you haven't experienced it, you're really doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally agree. And Jules, we're right at the end of our conversation. The hour just kind of flew by.
It really did. Thank you.
It's been a great conversation. How do we get in contact with you?
Yeah, please, if you're interested in engaging with me, reach out to the Arizona APSI chapter. You can get a hold of me through there. I also engage with ASD Maverick Consulting. So if you're looking for supported employment services, you can engage with VR and ask about ASD Maverick Consulting and get a hold of me there. Or through my APSI network. Please reach out via email or the messaging boards through APSI. And I'd be happy to engage and talk to anybody that's looking, to talk about this kind of stuff, or to look for new programs, or to improve their current programs. Or if you're an employer that's never engaged with somebody with disabilities and want to know more about it, please reach out to APSI. This is what we're here for. And This is what we want to do. Again, David, thank you so much for having me be part of this conversation. I love the work you do. It's really been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you again, Jules. This conversation really does reinforce that with the right training, the right technology, and the right attitude, and that comes from both sides of the table, people with disabilities are able to compete and are successful in the workplace. So thank you.
No, thank you. Absolutely agree with that.
Thank you for listening to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, with your host, David Steinmetz. Be sure to subscribe to Changing the Perception of Blindness, one conversation at a time, on your favorite podcast platform. And tune in live on Phoenix Business Radio X every third Friday at 9 a.m. We hope you feel inspired by today's conversation, and maybe we've even sparked a new idea or opportunity.